habits. Most of us like to think of ourselves as in complete control of what we're doing or what our management team is doing, so we like to think we decide. But in actuality, we're more like this little kid on the top of a wild elephant. That you can choose some things that you want the elephant to do, but most of the time the elephant will just do as it has always done. And that's the same thing with us, that we do more or less, most of our actions are the same actions as we did yesterday or last time. And some of them we can change. And this is extremely much true in management teams, because there are teams under pressure, they're teams with very difficult tasks, usually tasks with high visibility and high stakes, and they're under extreme time pressure. So most of the teams that I've met, they build up routines or habits, ways of interacting very, very fast. Within the first meeting or the first 2 meetings, they quickly find a way of interacting, and they continue to work in that way for years, sometimes even decades. So what this workshop is really about is how can we help these teams change some of these routines, because they build them so fast, and as strong as routines are, they're also always a little bit outdated, because the world is always changing. So the routines, the way we did it yesterday, they're not exactly necessarily made for today. Routines are extremely value creating. I can't think of anything value creating that doesn't include some kind of routine or habit. I mean, imagine a production unit that doesn't have routines. It's all routines. All the value creation is built on routines. If you see all kinds of collaboration or cooperation, it's always built on routines. If we have to start over every time, it's hopeless. Even innovation is built on routines. We still have to have some routines. But they're also outdated, so we need to challenge them all the time and find out what of these routines are really helping us and which ones are outdated. So that's what this is all about. And that's very interesting, because especially with the management teams, this is something that we don't know so much about. If you look at the knowledge we have on leadership teams, we have a lot of knowledge about process ideas. We know a lot about that they need to be reflective, they need to make decisions, they need to set goals. We have a lot of things about how we would like their processes to be. We know about the phases, norming, storming, performing. There are all kinds of models for the phases that teams go through. And we have a lot of knowledge about the input factors, that we need people that are capable of teamwork, we need good tasks for the teams, we need that they have support or coaching of some kind. So we know about the input factors. What we don't know so much about are these little steps. To move through the phases towards the process ideals, they have to change their habits all the time. Every step of the way, they have to leave something behind and move into something new. And how this is happening, that's what we've studied and tried to develop methods to improve. But it's also about making practice and theory work together, or making business and academia work together. It's all built on an industrial PhD project that started 7 or 8 years ago, and that's what I'm going to tell about in this first presentation. I'll show you how we observed transformational moments in the field, how we built a research project on that, studied, collected 54 cases of transformational moments, and built it into theoretical models with implications. In this way, going back and forth between theory and practice. Then after about 30 or 40 minutes, my colleagues will give you a chance to work with some of the tools that we've developed. They are hanging on the walls, and you will have a chance to choose one of them and go and try it on and ask questions and give your own examples. Then we're very privileged of having Karen Petersen with us from the University of Copenhagen, who have been using many of these tools and methods and thinking together with us. And Karen will explain how we've worked with not just changing the routines of a single management team, but how we've been working on changing the whole management thinking, or the whole way of practicing management in an entire organization. And then we'll finish up by talking about future perspectives, and I hope that We'll have time that each of you can say a little bit about what you found the most inspiring today, so that you can have a chance to hook up and know who to mingle with for the rest of the conference. Sounds good? Well, there are a few organizations that I need to thank or point your attention to. It's Aalborg University that has been the home of most of this research through the industrial PhD program. We have a program in Denmark where you can do PhD research and the university funded by private companies, so you can be sort of in the middle, and that's where I've been. So the other important party, of course, is development consultant that are paid for the research and working constantly to try to use it. And then, of course, thanks to Copenhagen University, that it will be obvious when you hear Karen's presentation that their contribution to actually putting many of these things into practice. So, what did we see? This is what I felt like in 2005. We were just finishing a large project where we've been training all the management teams in all of Arla. That's a very large Danish dairy company, and all of the management teams have gone through training, and we're doing evaluations of, okay, so what was really working, what were they most thrilled about, these management teams. And one of the things that they said consistently was that there were specific times where all of a sudden it seemed kind of a little bit magical, that all of a sudden we came into working really intensely. There were these times when suddenly we did something new and we found, hey, this team is really working. I remember when specifically they were talking like, we have a graveyard atmosphere in our team. All their meetings felt like someone had just died. This is how they said it themselves. And after finding out new tasks, what are really the most important tasks that we need to deal with, and changing the way that they led their meetings, all of a sudden one morning they sat down and they worked, and all of a sudden there was energy and power and even fun, and they were like, wow, what happened? This is kind of, it's, when you were there, saying, well, it's not really magic because they found new tasks and they found new ways of working, so there's a good explanation, but it felt like magic. You know, yesterday we couldn't work together, now we can. That's fantastic. So this is really what we started saying, if this is true, that there are specific moments that kind of change the way that these teams work, and these are some of the most important things, we need to understand those. So that makes enormous sense from a consultant perspective. From a researcher perspective, this is also very interesting, because if there are limited time spans, then we can study it. It's very difficult to study entire programs, but if it's something that happens within an hour, so we can videotape it, we can analyze it, we can collect different moments and we can compare them, and that's what we did. I won't go into too much detail about the research strategy, but the general idea was to follow 4 different teams over 6 months and collect as many episodes as possible, so as many transformational moments that we could. So every time the leadership team was together for development, we would call them every day and ask each manager, so did you do something new today? Did the team work together in a new way, and what was that? And we collected all of those, analyzed them to try to answer, okay, can these transformational moments be identified? Is it just something that you do in retrospect when you do evaluations, or can you, if you call the same day, will they still say, hey, we did something new? Is it possible for us to find types of moments, to make some kind of taxonomies of what kinds of types of moments do we find? And the last, maybe most interesting, is the one, can we find any recurring patterns? Is there, through all these 54 episodes that we found, is it possible to see how are these made? Do they have something in common, each one of these different transformational moments? And I will just briefly tell you what we found. Can transformational moments be identified? Yes, they can. But it's not that easy, of course. What you see here is that most of the transformational moments are just reported by one person. So they don't necessarily agree. So if there's a management team and I call all of them, most of the episodes that they will refer to, only one person sees this. It could be the manager. Usually the leader of the team will report more because I think they're just brighter. They see more. they're very keen and very interested in what's going on in this group. So sometimes the leader of the group might report 5 transformational moments in one day, and her colleagues will just mention 1. And that's what you see here. That most of the episodes are just seen by 1. Then some are seen by less than half, some are seen by more than half, and there wasn't a single one that they all reported. So they can be identified, but it's not that easy. People see different things. What's consoling though is that even the ones that you see that only 1 person reported it, when the other people are asked to say, was this transformational moment, was that important for you to reach your goals? They rate it as highly as the one that they more or less all saw. So even the ones that is only the manager that sees, once it's identified, the other people will say, oh yeah, that was right, that was really important in most of the cases. So we can find them, but it's not super easy to say that they're super clear. Then I try to find different taxonomies. How can we group these transformational moments? And this was the best taxonomy that we found. It's relatively simple and it makes good sense. It's based on the question of what is it then that's transformed. It's a good question. If you say that this management team, the way they're working, somehow transformed, so what has transformed? And we found 4 different structures that are transformed in these moments. 7 of the moments were dealing with personal style. That's when one of the members stops talking more, or talking less, or is more dominating, or less dominating in the discussions, or take a different role. So it's kind of a personal development from one of the participants. There weren't so many of those. It's part of many of the others, but the clean ones are only 7 moments. But as you see, the managers estimate them to be of almost the same importance as the other ones. Team technique were the moments where they changed their way, the techniques of dealing. This could be doing better facilitation, or start using whiteboards, or doing evaluation, kind of a technical skill in leading meetings, for example. And then there's the relationship depth, that when they are starting to be more open, or introduce something more about themselves, or something more about the department, putting more delicate issues or important issues on the table instead of evading problematic issues. That's why relationship and reality is the same. It's in the same category. If they, in the cases where they have good relationships, they also talk about more difficult things. So if you have a good relationship, you get more reality on the table, and that's what you need. The last category is shared mental models. That's the transformations where they make a new understanding of what's our shared task, a better understanding of what's really going on in our organization, this change that we're going through, how can we really understand it? Or they make a new model of what kind of roles, how's our role distribution in this team? All kinds of these kind of things. They consistently found that they thought we had the same understanding. They think we have the same understanding of the organization. They think we have the same understanding of the shared task. We think we have the same understanding of our role distribution, but in actuality it's usually very different. Are the 5 most important tasks that you need to deal with these next 6 months? It's never happened. So we have, even on the most important things, we still have different shared mental models. So these are the best. This is really the best taxonomy of types of transformational moments. Okay, so this is kind of the core model, answering the question. So is there a recurring pattern? How are moments of transformation made? This is a 3rd generation model. We try to do different models and go through all the episodes and say, okay, so this model, is this really describing what's going on in this particular episode, and then go through all the episodes. And this was the model that survived.
So it accounts for the process that happens in almost all of the different transformational moments. What you see in the heart of this model is the pattern break. This is where someone breaks a pattern and does something new. This is what we want to happen. But as I said in the beginning, people don't do that. They don't usually just stand up and do something else. It's not normal for someone else to take the leadership of the group. It's not normal for something else to introduce a topic that's never been dealt with before, or criticize their boss or something. You don't do that. So if we want them to improve their routines, there needs to be some kind of developmental framing or experimental framing before. An easy example would be the consultant saying, okay, to the leader of the group, why don't you try to give the facilitator role to one of the other members? That's a very easy experimental framing that sort of lowers the risk of doing something new and still adds more pressure in trying to succeed. So there's a high likelihood that someone will do something new. But it's not all new things that are good. This might not work in this group. So the transformational moment, it doesn't stop here. This is just someone else taking the facilitator role. Usually when someone does something new, some of the others will do something else. They will respond by not following this guy, or doing something else, or trying to take over, or all kinds of things. It can be explicit that they will say that this is not really a good idea, or it can be implicit that they just don't do what he says. So there's a negotiation going on. Is this new pattern? Is this something that we will accept? And they will negotiate it explicitly or implicitly. And what we see in most of the situation is that once this is done, once we've found a new way of working that's acceptable to everybody, there's a kind of an euphoric atmosphere. We call it repair here to use a psychodynamic term. But it's really when they pat each other on the shoulder saying, wait, this was great. If we can take this kind of conflict, we can do whatever in the future. Or I'm really happy that you had the guts to stand up to me there. Or this was difficult, but I'm happy that we did it. So they'll do something like that. That's very positive to sort of build relationship again. I usually say that if you do this negotiation right, it will usually wear your relationships a little bit. If you start doing something new in the management team and I think, he's getting too much power, or I don't like it, and I will try to do something else, we might not be the best of friends while we're doing this negotiation, so it's very important, once we find, okay, so now it's okay, then we shake hands and we smile and we do something to show that, okay, now we have agreed, now we have a way forward. Those of you that want to dwell more into this will have the chance later. Okay, so these were some of the major findings or results, and I would like to just share with you a little bit about the most important implications. Now we're moving slowly from the models towards application. There's a step between the models and the tools, and this is some of these implications. The first implication, if we believe that these transformational moments exist, if we believe that this is really important, it's an important way of how management teams improve, is that they break some of their routines and replace them with something else. Then we have to accept that they're not really good to begin with. That's pretty easy. And many of the common understandings, including Katzenbach understanding, will say that we can either have a group or we can have a team. And then you're kind of crazy if you give really difficult tasks to teams that are new. You have to understand that they have to be improved first. You have to give them easy tasks first, and then more difficult tasks. I kind of liked it to this analogy, saying that you should be careful not to think of management teams as a big sturdy car with an automatic transmission. Because in this kind of car, this is how many people think of leadership teams. You just get yourself a leadership team, you get in and you push the speeder, and then you keep pushing and it will go faster and faster and faster until it reaches its maximum speed. This is a normal way of thinking of it. If you look at this research, you'll have to say, well, actually, management teams, they look more like this kind of sports car with a stick shift. So that if you just get in the first gear and you push the speeder, it will make a lot of noise, and it will sound like it's going fast. But it's not really going fast, it's still in the first gear. So if you wanted to go fast, you will have to push the clutch and change the gear, so they will start working in a new way. So this kind of change in thinking is really important, because this also means that it's not free. It takes time and effort for a team to be really good. So you have to make a decision whether, is this really supposed to be a really tight-knit team? Do we have a task that's very important that we can only do together? Then we have to invest a lot of time and money in changing gears. If it's not really important, if most of our work can be done separately, then we should really, it's okay to stay in the second gear. And that's a conscious decision that you have to make. So the change is really, instead of thinking that you're either a team or a group, and all management teams should be high performance, instead you should think, well, management team has to choose the degree of teamwork. Has to choose, are we just a team that works a little bit like a team, or are we a team that will work a lot, very closely? Those of you that are interested in these implications should go to that workshop over there in a few minutes. Second implication, harmony is a false ideal. This is a pretty rough set, but the point here is that if we acknowledge then when teams improve is when they break their routines, they do something new, they challenge the status quo. We can't really use teams that are always like this, smiley, happy, clean, and friendly. I think this is a part of how we've sold the idea of teamwork is, hey, if you make a team, you'll all be happy and shiny all the time, and it will be very effective, and it will feel great. Whereas my message and what we found is, well, in actuality, if you want these teams to develop, you'll need more a team kind of like this. Has a different understanding that says, well, we might not be clean all the time. We may have to do things that are not really funny, and we may have to fight amongst ourselves sometimes, and we need to deal with issues that are difficult, and we need to do some new things. And when we do new things, they look clumsy the first couple of times. So it's better to have an ideal of, hey, we might get dirty and we might fight among ourselves, but we'll manage, instead of trying to live up to an harmonic ideal of a management team. And if you do this, you'll tend to go around problems. To preserve harmony, we'll deal with issues that can preserve harmony. And that's really not what you want a management team to do. You want a management team to deal with the difficult issues. So you want this kind of idea instead. Yeah. Instead of just developing automatically, they develop when they have the courage to engage each other on difficult issues. And that's usually one of the important things that we train, is that to try to get away from just preserving harmony and making a team that feels great, to making a team that deals with difficult issues. Yeah. Last implication, maybe the most important implication really, is that we need to understand leadership differently. It's not a direct implication of the research, but it's more something that we noticed along the way, that the way most of us understand leadership as a role. I have a role as a leader, and I use my resources and I use my sanctional powers to make followers follow a goal. That's a relatively common way of understanding leadership. It's extremely individualistic. You can't see the task. You can't see the tasks of the management team. Actually, if you just want to exert your own influence over your followers, a management team is a nuisance. It's in the way. What should I use the rest of the team for? I can do this. It's much easier on my own. So we need a different understanding of what leadership is. And Rath and his colleagues from Center for Creative Leadership has made this a new ontology that's called Shared Direction, Alignment, and Commitment, DAC for short. And the idea here is to think about leadership as a production, as something that we do instead of something that we are. So there's leadership when we have established shared direction, alignment, and commitment, regardless of whether there are managers or not. It takes a while to just get your brain to work around this, but we found it extremely useful. And once you start thinking like this, you'll notice that there are a lot of tasks, because where you can use your own influence without your team, but if you need to create shared direction, you need the others.
if you want to do alignment or coordination, you need the others. Some people can create commitment on their own, but most of us will need a group to create commitment. So once you start thinking that this is really the leadership task, it's easier to see how you need your team. And it creates better tasks for teamwork. Yeah. So instead of thinking of leadership as a position or a role, you should think of leadership as something that you produce. It doesn't mean that they're not managers or leaders are still very important, but it's not necessarily leadership they do, it's something that they have to produce. This is a whole project on its own, but I hope to just make you curious enough to study it more. What we've done from this is that we've changed it, all the implications and the models, into tools and programs. Some of them are described in this folder. You can get it on the internet or somewhere. So I brought a few over here, and we've used this in a number of very different companies, private and public, with great success. Going from something like doing global teams in Danfoss, or helping the Danish national team, or taxation, government agencies, municipalities, all kinds of organizations. Yeah. And that's what I want you to try some of these things in a few moments. If you look around on the walls, we've created 5 different groups, and if my colleagues will just go and stand next to them.